right, we have Peter Butel, who's the energy director at Pegasus Econometric Group, and of course the big question, war means what for the economy?
Well, of course, for every dollar advance in oil, it's going to take about $6 billion out of the economy. It adds about $3.3 billion to our import bill, and for every $10 rise in the price of oil, it adds about 1.5% to inflation. But having said that, the good news so far tonight is that after having risen about $7 to $8 originally, we're now only about $3 higher. It started to come back down. And it seems that the closer we get to an American victory, the more likely it is that oil prices will start paying attention to the fundamentals, supply and demand. Right now we've got plenty of supply, and if we can focus on that, oil prices will start to come down.
So we have to start saying how far we are in a winning situation, and that'll have a lot to do with what goes on.
It really will. If it looks like we're about to win, then the next question we're going to have to ask ourselves is, what are we going to do with the 5 million barrels of Kuwaiti and Iraqi oil once it's brought back into the system? And once it is, then we can see oil prices do the reverse of what we've seen them do the last 5 months.
Mm-hmm. Peter, let me ask you something. There's a lot of outrage in this country that the Japanese, the Germans, from a financial standpoint, are doing basically nothing. What kind of pressure should be exerted there, and is that a true perception? Should they be doing a lot more?
Well, I think certainly when you look at Japan's reliance on oil, and of course the president tonight said that it wasn't just oil, but I think that most Americans see a connection here between what we're doing and our interest in the area with oil. One would think that Western Europe and Japan would want to add a lot more to it because it's their energy security as well that is tied up in this entire affair.
Doesn't this also point out a tremendous failure on the part of our politicians, that we are so reliant on oil? We have no other, we haven't had an energy, I don't think ever had a real energy policy.
I wrote a scathing review about that yesterday, and I said that someday they're going to have to answer, and certainly for any blood that may be on their hands eventually, because we have not done anything about it. And a lot of oil analysts saw this coming. I wrote in July of '87 that we had to make a decision to either pay for energy security now or pay for it later with a fight. And this is exactly what we're doing. So we do need an energy policy. We need to get consumers, we need to get business, we need to get politicians, and the environmentalists all involved in trying to put together a policy that will make these type of situations less important to us as a nation. So it's definitely a very, very important thing for us to do.
We want to thank you very much for coming here, especially in our station, since we know your dad is Bill Butel, who's an anchorman also in the city. Thank you very much, Peter.
Okay, yeah, again, Peter, thank you. Just getting some late information, and the latest information is from our government is that that the Iraqi Air Force has been decimated. To the words of the Pentagon, the Iraqi Air Force has been decimated, and the 2 elite Republican guards, these are the top of the line of the Iraqi units, 2 elite Republican Guard units have been wiped out. Again, the words from the Pentagon. We're going to take a break right now, and we will be back in just a moment on this historic night when Desert Shield became Desert Storm. In the Gulf, the latest information that I got, I mentioned to you earlier that 2 of those elite Guard units have been wiped out. One of them, we're told, was in northwestern Kuwait, the other one was in southern Iraq, and the word that we get is that there was hardly any resistance at all, basically no resistance. All right, now, this is Operation Desert Storm. As you know, the American commander says his men are the thunder and the lightning of that storm. They certainly were over Baghdad. The sky lit up with Iraqi anti-aircraft fire, apparently unable to reach any of the high-flying American bombers. The word that we got was that every single one of them returned back to the base safely. Only Allied air power is pounding Iraq right now, and pounding it with the most massive show of strength in history.
John, the Pentagon says that is encouraging news so far. They emphasize it's still early. So far, the word is good on possible American casualties, but they're not giving out any numbers yet. Perhaps they don't have them themselves. The only briefing the Pentagon gave a little over an hour ago, they said some of the planes were still in the air at that time, so there was no accurate count of any planes being shot down. So far, there are no confirmed reports of any Iraqi missiles fired during the attack, and so far there are no confirmed reports of any Iraqi planes even getting into the air during the attack. As we've been telling you this evening, President George Bush addressed the country at 9 o'clock this evening. He told Americans that the attack on Iraq had in fact begun. He said the sanctions simply weren't enough to convince Saddam Hussein to get his forces out of Kuwait, and he said that Operation Desert Storm was proceeding as planned.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. These attacks continue as I speak. Ground forces are not engaged. This conflict started August 2nd when the dictator of Iraq invaded a small and helpless neighbor. Kuwait, a member of the Arab League and a member of the United Nations, was crushed. Its people brutalized. 5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined. This military action, taken in accord with United Nations resolutions and with the consent of the United States Congress, follows months of constant and virtually endless diplomatic activity on the part of the United Nations, the United States, and many, many other countries. Arab leaders sought what became known as an Arab solution, only to conclude that Saddam Hussein was unwilling to leave Kuwait. Others traveled to Baghdad in a variety of efforts to restore peace and justice. Our Secretary of State, James Baker, held an historic meeting in Geneva, only to be totally rebuffed. This past weekend, in a last-ditch effort, the Secretary General of the United Nations went to the Middle East with peace in his heart, his second such mission, and he came back from Baghdad with no progress at all in getting Saddam Hussein to withdraw from Kuwait. Now, the 28 countries with forces in the Gulf area have exhausted all reasonable efforts to reach a peaceful resolution, have no choice but to drive Saddam from Kuwait by force. We will not fail. As I report to you, air attacks are underway against military targets in Iraq. We are determined to knock out Saddam Hussein's nuclear bomb potential. We will also destroy his chemical weapons facilities. Much of Saddam's artillery and tanks will be destroyed. Our operations are designed to best protect the lives of all the coalition forces by targeting Saddam's vast military arsenal. Initial reports from General Schwarzkopf are that our operations are proceeding according to plan. Our objectives are clear. Saddam Hussein's forces will leave Kuwait. The legitimate government of Kuwait will be restored to its rightful place, and Kuwait will once again be free. Iraq will eventually comply with all relevant United Nations resolutions, and then, when peace is restored, it is our hope that Iraq will live as a peaceful and cooperative member of the family of nations, thus enhancing the security and stability of the Gulf. Some may ask, why act now? Why not wait? The answer is clear. The world could wait no longer. Sanctions, though having some effect, showed no signs of accomplishing their objective. Sanctions were tried for well over 5 months, and we and our allies concluded that sanctions alone would not force Saddam from Kuwait. While the world waited, Saddam Hussein systematically raped, pillaged, and plundered a tiny nation, no threat to his own. He subjected the people of Kuwait to unspeakable atrocities, and among those maimed and murdered, innocent children. While the world waited, Saddam sought to add to the chemical weapons arsenal he now possesses an infinitely more dangerous weapon of mass destruction, a nuclear weapon. And while the world waited, while the world talked peace and withdrawal, Saddam Hussein dug in and moved massive forces into Kuwait. While the world waited, while Saddam stalled, more damage was being done to the fragile economies of the Third World, the emerging democracies of Eastern Europe, to the entire world, including to our own economy. The United States, together with the United Nations, exhausted every means at our disposal to bring this crisis to a peaceful end. However, Saddam clearly felt that by stalling and threatening and defying the United Nations, he could weaken the forces arrayed against him. While the world waited, Saddam Hussein met every overture of peace with open contempt. While the world prayed for peace, Saddam prepared for war. I had hoped that when the United States Congress, in historic debate, took its resolute action, Saddam would realize he could not prevail and would move out of Kuwait in accord with the United Nations resolution. He did not do that. Instead, he remained intransigent, certain that time was on his side. Saddam was warned over and over again to comply with the will of the United Nations, leave Kuwait or be driven out. Saddam has arrogantly rejected all warnings. Instead, he tried to make this a dispute between Iraq and the United States of America. Well, he failed. Tonight, 28 nations, countries from 5 continents, Europe and Asia, Africa and the Arab League, have forces in the Gulf area standing shoulder to shoulder against Saddam Hussein. These countries had hoped the use of force could be avoided. Regrettably, we now believe that only force will make him leave. Prior to ordering our forces into battle, I instructed our military commanders to take every necessary step to prevail as quickly as possible and with the greatest degree of protection possible for American and Allied servicemen and women. I've told the American people before that this will not be another Vietnam. And I repeat this here tonight. Our troops will have the best possible support in the entire world, and they will not be asked to fight with one hand tied behind their back. I'm hopeful that this fighting will not go on for long, and that casualties will be held to an absolute minimum. This is an historic moment. We have in this past year made great progress in ending the long era of conflict and Cold War. We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders. We have no argument with the people of Iraq. Indeed, for the innocents caught in this conflict, I pray for their safety. Our goal is not the conquest of Iraq. It is the liberation of Kuwait. It is my hope that somehow the Iraqi people can, even now, convince their dictator that he must lay down his arms, leave Kuwait, and let Iraq itself rejoin the family of peace-loving nations. Thomas Paine wrote many years ago, "These are the times that try men's souls." Those well-known words are so very true today. But even as planes of the multinational forces attack Iraq, I prefer to think of peace, not war. I am convinced not only that we will prevail, but that out of the horror of combat will come the recognition that no nation can stand against a world united. No nation will be permitted to brutally assault its neighbor. No president can easily commit our sons and daughters to war. They are the nation's finest. Ours is an all-volunteer force, magnificently trained, highly motivated. The troops know why they're there, and listen to what they say, for they've said it better than any president or prime minister ever could. Listen to Hollywood Huddleston, Marine Lance Corporal. He says, "Let's free these people so we can go home and be free again." He's right. The terrible crimes and tortures committed by Saddam's henchmen against the innocent people of Kuwait are an affront to mankind and a challenge to the freedom of all. Listen to one of our great officers out there, Marine Lieutenant General Walter Boomer. He said, "There are things worth fighting for. A world in which brutality and lawlessness are allowed to go unchecked isn't the kind of world we're going to want to live in." Listen to Master Sergeant J.P. Kendall of the 82nd Airborne. "We're here for more than just the price of a gallon of gas. What we're doing is going to chart the future of the world for the next 100 years. It's better to deal with this guy now than 5 years from now." And finally, we should all sit up and listen to Jackie Jones, an Army lieutenant, when she says, "If we let him get away with this, who knows what's going to be next?" I've called upon Hollywood and Walter and J.P. and Jackie and all their courageous comrades in arms to do what must be done. Tonight, America and the world are deeply, deeply grateful to them and to their families. And let me say to everyone listening or watching tonight, when the troops we've sent in finish their work, I'm determined to bring them home as soon as possible. Tonight, as our forces fight, they and their families are in our prayers. May God bless each and every one of them and the coalition forces at our side in the Gulf, and may he continue to bless our nation, the United States of America.
President George Bush, in a speech delivered about 9 o'clock this evening, in the wake of what so far has been a very successful opening to the campaign against Saddam Hussein, Operation Desert Storm. However, it is now 10 minutes past 7 o'clock in the morning in Baghdad. That means it's daylight, and the Iraqis admittedly had trouble competing with American aircraft at night. It remains to be seen whether or not, now that they can see a little better what's going on, whether they're able to mount any sort of a counteroffensive to the strikes that have been going on over there now. We understand last reports out of Baghdad are that it's quiet. The suggestion perhaps is a cynical one, but the timing for Operation Desert Storm, if you look at President Bush's agenda of domestic issues, might in fact be convenient to the president. The economy at home is in the grips of a recession. President Bush has had perceived difficulties dealing with some of the domestic issues. The well-publicized read my lips, no new taxes, flip-flop, the budget problems with the Congress before the end of last year, inflation running higher than it's been in a number of years, and some serious questions about the future domestically of the American economy. This Operation Desert Storm will take all of those unpleasantries off the front pages for a while and perhaps give the president and the administration some breathing room on the domestic front. Patrick McGrath is standing by at the White House for us once again, as he has been since all this began several hours ago. Patrick, is the president retired for the night, and what do we know of his agenda for later tonight and tomorrow?
Well, Jack, we understand he is retired. That's probably the best word to use. I think it's highly unlikely that he's sound asleep. He's going to be woken up throughout the night with progress reports. And as till tomorrow, I'm sure that it will be an all-day process of following events in the Gulf, although he may well go through some of the motions of doing other domestic business just to demonstrate that this hasn't totally taken over his preoccupation.
We had a report on the wire that the Reverend Billy Graham was in the White House tonight and would remain there throughout the night, and that, in fact, in times of difficulty, the president has turned to the Reverend Billy Graham for spiritual guidance. Do you know whether or not the Reverend Graham is there tonight?
It's our understanding the Reverend Graham was there and that the president did meet with him. Whether or not he is staying the night, I'm not sure about that. Earlier in the week, you may recall that he sought advice, I believe it was yesterday, from the Episcopal Bishop, Edmund Browning, an anti-war critic, incidentally, but he happens to be President Bush's pastor. So President Bush called him up and talked about the moral agony that he was going through in making this decision. He also talked to the pastor of the United States Senate. So he's been seeking religious counsel for this decision for some time. Yet, despite all of that, there are indications that the president had actually made up his mind to move militarily some time ago. So while I think he still appreciates the comfort and the consolation of religion, it apparently was not, well, it wasn't the decisive factor, at least in recent days. He apparently made the decision a while back.
Patrick, you cover the White House, and it is generally agreed that perhaps no one except President Bush would have had the foreign policy expertise to put this coalition together and over a period of 5 months get the cooperation of the Security Council of the United Nations, the enlist 28 other governments in support of what he wanted to do. He has been given the highest marks in terms of his ability as a foreign policy maker and global leader. And yet, as I alluded to a moment ago, he is getting barely passing grades in some of the domestic issues that he has been asked to confront as president. And I wonder how you see the dichotomy in the chief executive and what sort of explanation there might be for the difference in those two abilities.
Well, unfortunately for President Bush, this conflict, even if it turns out hugely successful, will not get him off the hook, because the election is just too far away. It's November of 1992, and people have very short memories. Even if this is a huge triumph and people acknowledge this man is absolutely the man to run foreign affairs, if we have a serious domestic problem, they may well decide, well, our international problems are behind us, our real priorities are domestic, and now we'll change from someone who's good at international to someone who's good at domestic policies. Some of our columnists here in Washington have pointed out, for example, that after World War II, Winston Churchill's party was voted out of office. And it's hard to imagine that, you know, after the bombing of Britain and Winston Churchill, the great savior, in the first election after World War II, they threw the conservatives out. And that's because, I guess, that people decide, okay, this was the party that's good for war, now we need a party that's good on domestic matters. And there was some of that carryover in the United States after World War II. A Republican Congress was elected after World War II. So, you know, to view this in political terms as though, oh, well, this will make George Bush a lock in 1992, I don't think that is simply there. And, yes, go ahead.
All right, Patrick, thanks very much. We'll ask you to stand by. We'll be checking back with you here in a few moments. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Pat. Only a few reporters were in Baghdad when Operation Desert Storm started. I think there were something like 45 people, including the crews. And it started just a little over 4 hours ago. They're all in the same hotel. Most of them went to the basement to a bunker down there when they heard the fighter jets. John Holloman, Bernie Shaw, Peter Arnett stayed upstairs in the room to see what was happening. They worked for CNN, and they filed some of the very first reports on the air attack.
The skies of Baghdad have been filled up with the sounds of gunfire here tonight. There's still lights on all over Baghdad, and there are bullets being fired up into the air. You can see tracers along with other bullets going up into the air. From the sounds of things, they are the attack, if there is an attack on Baghdad, is occurring near Saddam International Airport. We're going back over to the window now to see what we can see. There have been some sirens here tonight, but we still have seen no signs of any airplanes coming in here. All we are seeing is the Iraqi response from the ground. Many tracer rounds that you can perhaps hear the sound of bombs in the background. We're going to put our microphone out the window. I think you'll be able to hear this sound. Night sky of Baghdad. The time here about 20 minutes to 3 in the morning. I'm getting away from the window here now as I can see more and more tracer rounds very close to our broadcasting position.
What seemed to have happened about 20 minutes ago, the anti-aircraft weapons in the city center where we are living around the government buildings erupted in fire. There must have been 200 guns firing to the sky. We did not see any aircraft around, but we did hear the alarm sirens. About 2 minutes after that, there were loud explosions, obviously bombing in at least 3 parts of the outskirts of the city. We have no idea what those targets were, but they were in the direction of the airport and some military barracks. John?
All right, Peter. I'm going to go to the window again so our viewers can stay as much in touch with the situation as possible. I've just seen an emergency blue flashing light on a vehicle down on the streets below. You can hear what I can hear, I imagine, and what we both hear is more of that eerie silence we were talking about before this attack began. On the the main drag of Baghdad. We just saw one vehicle go by. There was a bus that went by about 10 minutes ago. The skies here were filled with tracer bullets about 10 or 15 minutes ago, just before we heard all these explosions. Right now, a big portion of the city, the portion where we are, has been blacked out. We've lost electricity. Now off to the south of our position, we can see some more tracer rounds going up into the sky over some of the main downtown Baghdad buildings in the direction, generally, Peter, of the presidential palace.
It is in the direction of the presidential palace, but the palace is barely a mile from here, as are the main communication centers, and the bombing has not come in this far yet. The attack did begin about 2:30 a.m. our time. The skies are clear. There's stars, but the city was deathly quiet all day. Traffic has been dwindling, and shops were closed, and people have been moving out. Now, here in the hotel, the Al Rashid Hotel where we are, there was some indication. Earlier this evening, some of our colleagues received calls from friends who said tonight may be the night for the multinational force to begin its strike, threatened strike against Iraq, and tonight it has come.
After the president addressed our country this evening, there was a briefing at the Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense, Dick Cheney, spoke with General Colin Powell, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They gave a general picture of what's happening tonight in the Gulf. Of course, they could not get specific, but they did say that the operation has gone very well. In fact, we have just been told that 100 Iraqi Air Force strips have been devastated, and that all of the chemical and all of the potential nuclear plants have been destroyed, every single one of them, and that all of the missiles, as we mentioned to you earlier, that were aimed at Israel in the western part of Iraq, they have all been destroyed. Now, if all of that is true, that is phenomenal. Brian Wilson has been standing by at the Pentagon all evening watching the developments. Back to Brian now. Brian, have you heard the information that I just passed on? Is that true?
We have not heard official confirmation of that information. It is beginning to leak out in dribs and drabs here at the Pentagon, and that is consistent with what we were beginning to hear. I believe that must be the case, especially in the case of the Iraqi missiles, because those missiles were supposed to be the first thing that Saddam Hussein fired off against Israel in the event of an attack. That did not happen. The betting here in the Pentagon press room is that's because those missiles don't exist anymore. Now let's talk a little bit about the situation earlier this evening. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Colin Powell, walked into the briefing room along with Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney. We're now going to take you to some of that tape from earlier in the evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know you all heard the speech a short time ago by the President. And while there is not a great deal we can add now, we did want to be as forthcoming as we can with you. At 7 o'clock tonight, as you all know by now, Eastern Time, 3 o'clock Thursday morning in the Gulf, the armed forces of the United States began an operation at the direction of the President to force Saddam Hussein to withdraw his troops from Kuwait and to end his occupation of that country. At the direction of the President, I signed the execute order yesterday afternoon to undertake this operation, subject to certain conditions. It was to begin only after we'd met the terms of the resolution passed last Saturday by the Congress. Those conditions have been complied with, and proper notice has been given as required. And the operation was not to take place if there had been any last-minute diplomatic breakthroughs. The operation underway tonight, taking place in the pre-dawn darkness of the Persian Gulf, involves Allied air forces of 4 nations: the United States, the United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. As they undertake their missions, they do so after months of careful planning. At the direction of the President, great care has been taken to focus on military targets, to minimize U.S. casualties, and to do everything possible to avoid injury to civilians in Iraq and Kuwait. The targets being struck tonight are located throughout Iraq and Kuwait. Our focus is on the destruction of Saddam Hussein's offensive military capabilities, the very capabilities that he used to seize control of Kuwait and that make him a continuing threat to the nations of the Middle East. These are the same capabilities that now threaten American and Allied forces in the Gulf. Our goal, the same one we have maintained throughout Operation Desert Shield, is to liberate Kuwait and enforce the resolutions of the UN Security Council. This portion of the campaign, directed against Saddam Hussein's offensive military force, is an enormously complex undertaking. It involves all of the services of the United States military and hundreds of U.S. and Allied aircraft. It is an ongoing operation, and we must therefore limit the kind and the amount of information that we provide in these early stages. This obviously is different from what happened in Panama in December of 1989, where most of the operation was over by the morning of the first day. We understand your need for information about what will happen next, and we are well aware of our obligation to keep the American people informed. But you must also understand that we cannot talk about future operations without putting at risk the safety of those who will have to carry them out.
Among other things, quote, "The great battle has begun." An announcer says that President George Bush has, quote, "committed his murderous crime, and we shall teach him and his bastards a lesson they will never forget." That's a quote from an official Iraqi state radio broadcast. If the reports in this country are true, the school is going to be convened late, and the lesson is going to be very difficult to teach, because apparently the Allied airstrikes tonight were successful beyond anybody's expectations. There is a report out of Ankara, Turkey, that Turkey is considering declaring war against Iraq. That could be very troublesome to Saddam Hussein. Turkey borders his country, and there are 150,000 Turkish troops arrayed along that border. Saudi television is quoting an Israeli TV report saying that Saddam Hussein's main palace in Baghdad was destroyed during those air raids earlier this evening. So apparently Saddam Hussein's on the radio talking to his people. Turkey is reportedly ready to declare war. Saudi television reports Israeli television as saying that the palace was hit and destroyed. In terms of the Pentagon's assessment of what's going on, Les Aspin, who's the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, was on the wires earlier tonight saying that America's ace in the hole, and this was expected going in, was our ability to jam their electronics. Aspin said it was almost so effective that when Saddam Hussein picked up the telephone, the phone would be dead. That was a bit of an exaggeration, but according to the success reports on the airstrikes, not much of one. And apparently things are going exactly as the administration planned and hoped that they would. For families here, that is good news. Loved ones fighting in the Persian Gulf, naturally a time of terrible anxiety. Bob O'Brien is spending the evening with one family in Valley Stream, Long Island, who lost a loved one to Operation Desert Shield, ordered out on Christmas Day, and they are very much feeling the tension of this night. Bob?
Well, you're right, Jack. This household here, as with hundreds of thousands of households around the country, obviously are glued to the television sets, watching everything that has been coming across, as we have been doing right here, watching all of the coverage that we've been giving here on Channel 5 rapidly. We were in the home of Major Kenneth Stock in Valley Stream with his wife Bonnie. His 6-year-old son Andrew has finally gone to bed, and 2-year-old Emily, I think, is out, and this is Major Stock's mother-in-law. Bonnie, when you hear that there are reports that everything has been going the way it has been going, that they've knocked out all of these strategic and the bases from which Iraq could strike back, how does that make you feel? Your husband is in Bahrain in Saudi Arabia now.
He was as of Friday. I don't know where he is right now. They had a desert operation set up for them, and I would assume that they're there right
So you're
now.
really not sure where exactly he is?
No.
But from what you're hearing now tonight, as we've been sitting here watching the reports coming in from the Gulf, what are your feelings about what's going on there and what happened?
It seems to be going exactly as they said it would go, which makes me feel a lot better. It doesn't seem to be any surprises right now. I have a lot of anticipation for tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen. And
you feel
so
in
far
any way,
it seems okay.
Yeah, you feel in any way that things are going better than you thought they may have when hostilities broke out?
Yeah, I thought that Israel would get involved immediately. And I guess that scared me because I felt it would draw the entire region into a war, if not, in fact, many more countries in the world into a war.
Now, you talked to Ken on Friday by telephone. Yes. What was he thinking and feeling about what was facing him?
He's very positive. He's the morale officer for the brigade, and he's just a very positive person. He uses his sense of humor a lot. He did not say anything about any imminent trip to the desert. He just talked a lot about what was going on with his friends there, And he really sounded okay. He said he was happy to have talked to me. It made him feel better to have talked to me, and Emily was home then, too, to talk to him.
You're not sure you'll be waiting for that next phone call.
Yes.
Let me tell you something, first of all, about Major Kenneth Stock. There's a candle burning in this front window here in Valley Stream that will remain on until Kenneth Stock comes back through the front door there. And there's a picture of Ken and Bonnie that was taken on their 10th wedding anniversary. Before December 1st, when he was activated with the 411th Combat Engineer Brigade, which is part of the Army Artillery, he has been a probation officer for Nassau County for the last 19 years. And he's 44 years old, and his mom is here, Helen Stock. Helen, sending a son off to war at age 44, that must have been something you certainly didn't expect.
I think at any age it's a difficult thing, although he is fortunate in that he is with a group of men that he has worked with for some years. And I would say that I'm concerned, but I think that if I had a young son, 19 or 20 or 21, that was going without the experience, I would feel even worse.
Yeah.
And we have all of the prayers of all of our friends, neighbors, and church members, and this is a big source of comfort, too.
So you found a lot of support from your friends? And
That's right, that's right. I think we both have, we both have.
all right, well, again, I want to thank all of you for being so gracious as to allow us to come in to your house all of a sudden like this. One of the things that Defense Secretary Cheney tonight said that we being the American military establishment and the government, hope to settle this. They had hoped to settle it peacefully, but now that it has begun, their hope is to end it with the lightest possible loss of American lives and American casualties, and it's a hope that is fervently shared by us here in the home of Major Kenneth Stock and in the homes of people all across this country, the hundreds of thousands of Americans who are now involved in Desert Storm. So reporting live from Valley Stream, Bob O'Brien, Fox News Channel 5. John, Jack, back to you.
All right, thanks, Bob. The United Nations tried very hard to keep peace in the Persian Gulf. It was, of course, the United Nations that set the deadline. As a matter of fact, they tried right up to the last minute. Christopher Jones reported in the past that they talked so long at the UN that they actually ran out of things to say, which is an incredible thing to say about the diplomats at the United Nations. I didn't think I would ever hear the UN described that way. But now that there is war, the members are watching the events of the night very, very closely, hoping, of course, the fighting will soon be over, as we all are. Secretary General is supposed to be there in his office. Christopher Jones is at the UN right now with the very latest for us. Chris?
Well, Johnny, I certainly thought I'd never say they ran out of words, but of course they did. And it may be overstating it just a little bit, but not too much, to say that the frustration that the diplomats here felt when no one seemed to be listening is now mirrored in some way by their satisfaction that Saddam Hussein apparently is finally getting the message. The message dealt not through words, but through bullets. It was Francois Mitterrand of France who today said words had failed, and so now it was time for guns to talk, and they have. Thomas Pickering, who is the American ambassador to the United Nations, has arrived back here to, what he says, brief some of the members of the Security Council about what is going on. Of course, the real briefing has been done by our brave colleagues from CNN in Damascus, in Baghdad, and he has been listening along with everyone else to what's going on. But he arrived in a somewhat good mood here tonight. First you'll hear, he arrived, and then we'll also hear from the Yemeni ambassador, who was one of Iraq's only allies here. First you'll hear from Ambassador Thomas Pickering.
We're over tonight at the request of the President of the Council. We'll be speaking with him bilaterally. I will be reporting to him as President of the Council on the steps that we have taken as we are informing governments around the world, and as we have informed the Secretary General. We'll probably follow up in the next hours, perhaps tomorrow, with a letter which we normally send to the members of the Security Council and the Secretary General, informing them when we do use military force about that use of military force, indicating, as we normally do under the Charter, that we are moving ahead to do that, and that letter will, of course, speak for itself when it is presented.
Since the crisis in the Gulf erupted, Yemen had called for a peaceful resolution of this crisis. We stood against war. We voted against the resolution that authorized the use of force. We opposed the use of force. We still oppose war. It's a futile war. It's a sad day for the United Nations.
Do you condemn the United States for what happened tonight?
I'm just saying that we are against the use of force, and we think that this is a needless war which could have been averted and solved through peaceful means.
Well, it may be a sad day for the United Nations, and that is exactly what the Secretary General said just a few hours ago, but no one can blame him, and no one can blame the United Nations for not trying. They certainly did their best to get the message to Saddam Hussein. He simply did not listen.